been surprised by how many game developers and coders have shown up to the Creative Momentum calls that we're running as part of the September Finish It Challenge. And even if you're not a game developer, I'm going to share a couple of things that I learned from them about creative momentum. So if you're a musician, an artist, a writer, photographer, I promise there's something for you in this video. And at the end, I'm going to ask you 5 questions on your project progress to help you reflect and think about what you're going to do differently over the weekend and into next week. Like I said, I was blown away by the amount of people who jumped on the call and had Blender open or were working in Unity or messaged me to say, oh, I'm in the middle of developing an iOS game or I'm working on this project with my kids. 80% of the people who are jumping on the calls and messaging me. And I guess part of that is they've a real affinity with streaming, with working online, with working on calls, but also they've got a real drive to keep working on the thing. Now, it's interesting. I worked in the gaming industry. I worked for Riot Games for 2 years and loved it and have made a whole bunch of friends and connections. But I don't think they're all watching my videos. And if you are, please say hi and comment below. But I just think that there's a niche of people that I hadn't even thought about, particularly in the creative space. And of course, you should see what they're doing. It's super creative. And also it's, for a lot of them, they've got their day job and then they're jumping on and they're sharing what they're doing on the progress. Literally one person jumped on while they were still working, saying, oh, I'll be with you in a few minutes. I'm just going to leave my camera off. I'm just going to wrap up, finish up here, and then I'll jump on. And they turned on they showed their screen. They showed the Blender project that they've been working on for over a year, developing animation resources for an upcoming game that now has a release date. So they've got a definite thing to be working for. The first area I think we can learn from game devs is they're used to shipping a product. And that means they either work towards like a minimal viable product or they go, well, it's good enough, because they know there's always going to be updates. They're always going to iterate, whether it's like a live service game that gets updated every 2 weeks, or they're going to work towards a DLC and a new version later on. There's always a chance to bug fix and get it better and improve it over time. And I think for artists and musicians, it's hard to process and think like that because there's a very definitive, this is the point where I put the work up, on Spotify, or I print it to an album, or I, frame it behind a piece of glass and put it up in a gallery. So it's hard to think like that. But I've definitely seen my wife get pieces back from the gallery and start editing them and painting them and adding pieces to it. The game devs that have been getting on the calls and have been showing up through the challenge, they have another job. And sometimes it's working in games, but they also have a desire to put their own thing out and work on their own thing on the side, a passion project. They're not burnt out by using their screen and they're happy to sit down and continue to working. In fact, they're energized now because the work bit's done for now and they're able to go and get on with what they're doing. From a lot of the game devs that I know, they're very well aware of kind of project management methodologies and frameworks, whether that's Scrum or Agile or something different. They're used to breaking things down into smaller bite-sized pieces of work so that they can get it done. And I think that mindset really helps. And I think a lot of creative people can learn from that, to be able to not just think about the huge big concept, but to break it down into little chunks, like what could I get done in a week or a month? Where do I need to outsource it, or where do I need to pull in either new equipment, resources, or like help? All of those things are super to be able to think and process, and then think about how do I timeline this, and is there critical pieces that might block progress. I think we sometimes as creatives don't think about that until we get there, and then suddenly we're taken out of the creative flow and we're having to problem solve, we're having to fix things, we're having to find solutions, and that can definitely be a hurdle for quite a few people. So like to actually think up front about, here's where I'm trying to get to, and even what would 80% look like? What would good enough? What would an MVP, a minimal viable product, look like? And how can we get out there? And I think there's a real power in that idea of a minimal viable product, because you're able to get something out and get feedback quicker. And you're able to build a feedback loop to improve, to iterate, and to come up with new solutions. And I think that is really fundamental to the creative process. And I think that a lot of people who have great creative success do that early in the process. They're not waiting to get to the very end. When you're so invested that when somebody gives you feedback, it's almost like a personal insult, as opposed to if you're able to invite people into the process. Now, trusted people, I don't think you've got to share everything on Instagram and let the world tell you what they like and don't like about it, but have a trusted group of people who you believe in their critical feedback now, and people who've done it, people who work on it. Like, I regularly send my music to my bandmate and collaborator, and when he comes back to me, he gives me feedback that I haven't heard, and I was like, oh, that's brilliant. I've been so in the weeds of the piece that I wasn't able to hear it from his fresh ears, and I really appreciate that. And it means that I'm much quicker able to refine it and get it to a place where it's better. So I can absolutely personally put my hand up and go, yeah, I find that super helpful. I think it's super important to recognize that every creative discipline struggles with a lot of the same issues, whether that's ideation and starting a project, whether that's getting stuck in the messy middle, whether it's getting to the end and not having the energy and motivation to then push or publish or sell your work. Like, I think it's really common for us all to trip up in the same things, and it's super helpful to learn from different disciplines and different skill sets that people bring. So that's why I want to share with you today why game developers have helped me to rethink creative momentum. I think another piece that coders and game developers all have in common is that they're really used to sharing their ideas and their struggles with online communities. So they need to build community around the game that they're working on, the platform that they're developing for, where they're sharing code, sharing ideas, figuring out how to overcome struggles, whether that's on Reddit, Discord, or YouTube. And I feel like that's missing for a lot of creative disciplines. There are some small subgroups, but part of what I want to do here is try to help as many creatives as possible to overcome and figure out ways to get through their blockages and get to finishing their projects and build a mindset and a muscle memory of finishing projects and kind of getting your work done and getting it out into the world in whatever way that works for you. I've got 5 questions for you to consider, whether you're part of the 30-day challenge or whether you're just thinking through your own projects and what you're working on at the moment. First question, how does your finisher identity feel this week? Do you feel like you're making progress? Do you feel like you're moving on? Do you feel like you're getting somewhere? Just reflect on that and think about what could you implement for next week to change and help that improve. Okay, second question, what tiny daily action have you been using that's helped you to make forward momentum and progress? And the third question, what progress have you actually tracked this week? Was there any one thing that you thought, oh, I'm going to keep an eye on my word count, the number of minutes I spend on it, how many times I've sat down and worked? What are you actually tracking, and is that helping you to feel like you're making progress towards your goals? Hey, and this is a slightly deeper one. What doubts have you encountered this week? What showed up for you, and how have you dealt with them? Those gnawing ideas, the things that are keeping you up at night, or what is it that's worrying you? I'd love to hear. Last question is, what small wins are you celebrating this week? It's really helpful for us when we break things down into smaller chunks to celebrate ticking those off and making progress. And that can be as simple as, oh yes, I got that done. I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea. Or I'm not going to have another cup of coffee until I've finished whatever that piece of work is. If you'd like to understand the type of creative finisher that you are, I'll put a quiz below. Honestly, it takes less than 2 minutes. There's only 10 multi-choice questions, and then I'll email you back a video with my overview of what your creative finisher type is and 2 or 3 suggestions on what you could do to continue to make progress. So if you'd like to be part of this community, there's a link in the description for a Discord server, but also if you're on my mailing list and you filled in the quiz, I'll send you a direct invite for our creative momentum calls. That's where we're jumping on and working together for an hour to an hour and a half, just to share the fact that we're making progress. You don't have to have your camera or your mic on. You can just sit there and work away. It's just a way to time box a little piece of time and energy for you to put it into your personal project. YouTube's going to recommend another video for you here, but don't forget there's a link in the description for you to fill in the quiz and get an invite to the Creative Momentum calls. Okay, it's sunny out there. I gotta walk the dogs. But until next time, stay creative.